The South African Post Office is the latest state-owned entity to be placed in business rescue after being placed under provisional liquidation earlier this year because it failed to pay its creditors. You'll recall the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa forced more than 500,000 people to abandon rail and go to more expensive modes of public transport. And after years of financial losses, SAA was forced government to relinquish its controlling stake in the entity. And recently, on the Fragile States Index, that's a measure to determine how at risk the country is, or any country is, of becoming a failed state, South Africa ranked 79 out of 179 countries, performing better than some of its peers like Brazil and India, but still a country at risk. There's a lot of expert writing which abounds, documenting some of the fixes South Africa needs to make to avert this fate, which include addressing service delivery failure, the institutional deficiencies, and creating an ethical and capable developmental state. Let's talk about this now with Professor Isaac Kambule, who's with the Wits School of Governance and Associate Professor of Political Economy, and Dr. Trevor Ngwane from UJ Center for Sociological Research, and also a practice director there. Both gentlemen join me now. Good evening to you and welcome, Prof. Kambule. You're joining us virtually, and Isaac, you are with us in studio. Let's talk then about some of the causing factors. But before we even get there, I think when we think of SOEs, Isaac, we think of a handful, we think of a few, the big ones, the repeat, culprits. Just share with the nation very quickly just how big, this area is, just how many state-owned enterprises there are in South Africa.
No, thank you so much, man, for that. Yeah, so we definitely have a number of state-owned enterprises in this country, and they go in the hundreds of them. And to such an extent that so many people are not even aware that even at the local government level, we have what we call municipal entities, of which form part of what we call state-owned enterprises, because they're formally governed by the state and all their mandates that are derived from the state. Right. So in this particular context, we must also understand that even in the cultural sector, in the human rights sector, in the socio-economic space, and many spaces, we have a number of municipal-owned entities of what we call your state-owned entities in the South African context. And it is very important for us then to deliberate on all of this, because in most cases, we only focus on a few. We focus on the main culprits that we talk about, and there are certain culprits that are not spoken about.
All right. Okay. So for our purposes tonight, and we're looking at some of the bigger ones, then the ones that we talk about often. When you autopsy what went wrong, what are some of the biggest causes of failure, Isaac?
So one of the key failures in the South African context is the failure to separate between ownership of these SOEs and as well as the management. So what does that mean? So it basically means in as much as the government owns majority of these state-owned enterprises, they tend to fail to give independence to the management to run these SOEs effectively. So in most cases, we have issues of political interference, whereby in as much as the management is being there are certain decisions that are taken by the political elite, and in that particular context, it borders what we call political interference. So these SOEs are unable to function independently. Whereas if we go to countries such as China, they are able to understand that all of these SOEs are critical for their development, and some of them are in the Fortune Global 500 because they are able to ensure that they can be competitive at a global landscape.
Oh, for us to be able to play in that space, that would be amazing. Trevor, if I can put this one to you, who then in South Africa is most impacted by failures like these?
Well, SOEs, benefit the working class and the poor primarily because they provide accessible commodities, transport, the basics, electricity. So it's the working class and the poor. Post office, is used mostly by poor people, by the working class, because the rich, they use the courier services and things like that. So that is the issue here. That number two, because of that, SOEs serve what I can call the developmental mandate. So this means that they are there to roll back the legacy of apartheid, of colonialism. So they are there to take the people away from the oppressions, destitution, poverty of the past and make their lives better. So if SOEs fail, then poor people, working class people, ordinary people, they suffer.
So SOEs are this opportunity, Trevor, to make real government's economic, social and strategic objectives. Isaac, if I could come back to you, let's talk about some of the missed opportunity inside these SOEs as you examine them and the conduct of their failure, the history of why they have failed. The other side of the picture could have been a really great one.
Definitely, it could have been a great one. For example, in as much as we talk about the failure of these SOEs, let's look at some of the thriving SOEs, such as your Industrial Development Corporation. Let's look at your Development Bank of Southern Africa. We are not talking about those institutions to figure out what is it that they're doing right in order for us to replicate such good governance models to the other SOEs that are failing. And again, in order for us to be able to say we want all of these SOEs to scale. So some of the missed opportunities that we often see here, for example, if you look at the issues of Transnet and PRASA, as Dr. Ngwane has mentioned, the cost of transportation in the South African context, if you look at the commuter services that were lost during the COVID-19 lockdown, majority of people ended up having to use some form of private transport in order for them to be able to be transported to work. And they spent a large share of their earnings in order to travel to work. And that's a missed opportunity because it means they were unable to increase their savings pool. And secondly, again, if we understand the high levels of poverty in this country, we are in a situation whereby the government is supposed to be ensuring that all of these critical infrastructure that are provided by SOEs are functional in order for it to fulfill the developmental mandate of ensuring that poor people are able to save more by having access to critical infrastructure.
So this should have been, based on what the pair of you are saying tonight, institutions that should have been guarded, extremely well because of the opportunities that they bring, a part of the economy that they can really activate in a way that other parts, of the economy can't. So we've missed the opportunity here. We've also talked about political interference. Dr. Ngwane, if we come to the benefit then of the President's SOE Council, and this was born out of a response to minimize political influence, does it hold the key to turning the situation around?
I don't think that the President Council is going to help because the main recommendation there is to set up an asset management company which will be profit-driven or be based on prioritizing profit over development. So I think the real problem here is the vision of our president and of the ANC government. And I suppose even opposition like DA and them, what they want is to continue helping the rich to get richer. And with the ANC, the aim really is what I can call self-enrichment, embourgeoisement, the creation of a black bourgeoisie. Of course, also the creation of an auxiliary black middle class. So the aim is not really to help the working class and the poor, but is to actually, transfer public funds into private pockets. That's why you have a lot of talk about privatization, outsourcing, commercialization. So the problem is the vision. And the Presidential Council's asset management company brings more privatization in the running of SOEs than is required or is necessary.
So what's going to turn this around, given, as both of you are concurring, it does hold a very important key for a very important demographic in South Africa, and in fact, it could be a major boost to our economy. What is it going to take? Isaac?
So at this point, that's a very important question. And one of the key issues is political willingness. And again, it's also related to the willingness to pursue national interest, because at the current moment, we are not pursuing the real economic growth that we are supposed to be pursuing. And in this particular context, the one thing that it's going to take is for the government to really explain to its citizens, firstly, the fact that the IDC and the DPSA are able to function optimally. What is stopping other SOEs to function at the very same rate? And this again goes to show particular issues of political willingness willingness in certain institutions over other institutions. So in this particular case, we need to prioritize and say these key entities are a priority for us in order to develop, and those that are not identified then as the most important priority, we need to figure out as to what the government does with them, particularly in the age of agility, where is very important, because some of them cannot even compete to save themselves.
Yeah, but here's the thing, as you say, and maybe I'll give the last word to you, Dr. Ngwane. You know, some SOEs are functioning. Is it just a case of, you know, the sticky fingers haven't gotten a hold of them yet to throttle them? Is it just a matter of time? Or is there a lesson in the way that they are run, the efficiencies that they can achieve, that must be, you know, replicated and then imposed on some of these, you know, some of the other ones that are not working?
Yes, so the major thing is what Professor Kambule is talking about, leadership. So if leaders are focused on enriching themselves, if leaders are focused on maintaining good relations with vested interests, with big capital, it won't work. I think the time has come now for the working class and the poor to stand up and actually take control and push, you know, force the government to do what is right, which is to stop corruption, to have honest people, skilled people running the SOEs with one mandate, you know, to make a better life for all. This is what this country needs. Otherwise, we're going down.
Professor Isaac Kambule is with the Wits School of Governance, Associate Professor of Political Economy, Dr. Trevor Ngwane at the UJ Center for Sociological Research and Practice Director there. Appreciate the both of you and your scholarship. Thank you for being with us on Full View tonight.